Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyoti Aravinda Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda. So I'll begin with a quote by Rumi. It says, outside, the landscape is covered with thorny crust, but we have a soft garden inside. Okay, so what is he referring to? What is the thorny crust outside? And what is the soft garden inside? Anyone? What does thorny crust outside refer to?
The ego.
The difficulties of life, basically, and our reactivity towards the difficulty is the thorny crust outside. But we have a soft garden inside, and that soft garden inside is the divine presence, which is the truth of what we are, which is always available to us for us to sort of go into, find our resources, our life springs, our peace. But we keep getting entangled in the thorny crust outside, and we get so entangled that we hypnotize ourselves into believing that I have no choice but to hurt from the thorns. It doesn't occur to me that I can withdraw from the thorns. I can find a space inside myself which need not be constantly pricked by the thorns. So that is a choice available to us, to withdraw into the soft garden inside ourselves. Now, how do we withdraw into the soft garden within ourselves? That is what we'll be exploring through our talk today. So I'm going to begin with Michael Singer's words. The foundations of spiritual growth and personal awakening are very much strengthened by the findings of Western science. Science has shown us how an underlying energy field forms into atoms, which then bind together into molecules and ultimately manifest into the entire physical universe. The same is true inside of us. So science tells us that every atom has an energy field, and that energy field precipitates the material of the atoms. Same is true for us. We all have an energy field which becomes the body, which becomes the life outside. The roots of what we are is in the energy that we have within us. So all that goes on inside has its foundation in an underlying energy field. It is the movements in this field that create our mental and emotional patterns, as well as our inner drives, urges, and instinctual reactions. regardless of what you call this inner force field, chi, shakti or spirit, it is an underlying energy that flows in particular patterns through your being. When looking at these patterns within yourself as well as in any other living species, it is not difficult to see that the most primal energy flow is the survival instinct. During eons of evolution, from the simplest of living forms to the most complex, there has always been the day-to-day struggle to protect ourselves. So what he's saying is, initially, basically our most primal, he has said that our whole life is about the energy field that we are, and our most primal energy field is the instinct to protect ourselves, right? Now, in the olden days, when we lived in the jungle, this instinct to protect ourselves would push us into flight or fight. But we've come away from that. Now the jungle could be a digital jungle. It could be news, it could be media, it could be someone's reaction to us which pushes us into the flight or fight mode. And our whole energies go into preserving ourselves when we are threatened, when we are psychologically threatened, because we are no longer really most of the times physically threatened. Okay? Nonetheless, the same impulses that make a deer run away urge you to run away. Suppose someone raises their voice at you or talks about an uncomfortable subject. These are not physically threatening circumstances, yet your heart starts pumping a little faster. That's exactly what happens to a deer whenever it hears a sudden sound. The heart pumps faster and there is either freezing or running away. In your case, however, it's usually the kind of fear that causes you to physically run away. It's just a deep, however, it's usually not the kind of fear that causes you to physically run away. It's just a deep personal fear demanding protection. Since it's not socially acceptable to run into the woods and hide like a deer, you hide inside yourself. This is important. You withdraw, close down, pull back behind your protective shield. What you're actually doing is closing down your energy centers. Even if you don't know you have energy centers, he's referring to the chakras, you've been closing them since kindergarten. You know exactly how to close your heart and put up a psychological protective shield. You know exactly how to close down the centers to avoid being too receptive and sensitive to the different energies coming in and causing fear. When you close down and protect yourself, you are pulling a shell around the part of you that is weak. This is the part that feels it needs protection. Even though no physical attack is taking place, you are protecting your ego, your self-concept. Although the situation may present no physical danger, it may cause you to experience disturbance, fear, insecurity, and other emotional problems. So you feel the need to protect yourself. The problem is that the part of you that gets disturbed is way out of balance. It is so sensitive that the slightest little thing causes it to overreact. You are living on a planet spinning around the middle of outer space, and you're either worrying about your blemishes, the scratch on your new car, or the fact that you burped in public. It's not healthy. If your physical body were that sensitive, you would say you were sick. But our society considers psychological sensitivities normal, because most of us don't have to worry about food, clothing, or shelter. We have the luxury to worry about a spot on our pants, or laughing too long, or saying something wrong. Because we've developed this hypersensitive psyche, We constantly use our energies to close around it and protect ourselves. But this only hides the problems, it does not fix them. You're locking your illness inside yourself and it will only get worse. So let's just understand what he's saying. He's saying that whenever something which goes against your idea of what it should be happens, your self-protective mechanism comes forward. And the deer will run away, but you will run away not outside but into yourself. You will withdraw into yourself so that you don't feel hurt. But that withdrawal blocks your chakras, because chakras are spinning energy centers from which we are absorbing energy. Now, because we are hypersensitive and you don't want to absorb that energy, it's like throwing away the baby and the bath water. You close your chakras so you don't even absorb the universal vital energy which makes you flow. So whenever you're feeling very threatened, automatically you'll feel very tired because you've withdrawn in order to protect yourself. Michael Singer saying that you're locking the illness inside you instead of letting it flow out. So now once you've made a commitment to free yourself of this scared person inside you, you will notice that there's a clear decision point at which your growth takes place. Spiritual growth is about the point at which you start to feel your energy change. Listen carefully. For instance, somebody says something and you start to feel the energy get a little strange inside. You will actually start to feel a tightening. That is your cue that it's time to grow. It's not time to defend yourself because you don't want that part of you which you would be defending. If you don't want it, let it go. So very important point. Something happens that makes the energy inside you change. You feel a tightening, you feel something unpleasant. What he's saying is the familiar way will be to tighten. We started class. We started class by saying that outside the landscape is covered with thorny crust, but we have a soft garden inside. The thorny crust is our reactive outer consciousness, which is just waiting to be triggered. For most of us, we are hypersensitive, and that is in terms of consciousness and illness, because we want to be sensitive, but being touchy is another matter. Being touchy is being imbalanced, and it's an illness of the consciousness. So that part of you which keeps reacting to outer contacts are the thorns inside. Now Michael Singer is saying that the moment you start feeling the prick of those thorns and you feel the energy inside you changing, an agitation, a discomfort coming in, that's the point to grow. Now, if you go down the old pathway of sinking into the same emotional reactive patterns, there's no growth. You're just going around the same circle again and again. But when your energy inside starts changing to something strange, that's your chance to grow. Tell yourself that this is my chance to grow. Now, how do you grow? Listen carefully what you do. You will eventually get conscious enough so that the moment you see the energy start getting strange, you stop. You stopped getting involved in the energy. If it normally causes you to start talking, you stop talking. Normally, he said this, I have to talk to fix it, to tell him that he's wrong. You stop talking. You just stop mid-sentence because you know where it will go if you continue. The moment you see the energy getting imbalanced inside, The moment you see the heart starting to tense and get defensive, you just stop. What exactly does it mean to stop? It's something you do inside. It's called letting go. When you let go, you're falling behind the energy that is trying to pull you into it. When the energies inside start to move, you do not have to go there. For instance, when your thoughts start, you do not have to go with them. Let's say you're outside taking a walk and a car drives by. Your thoughts say, I wish I had that car. You could just keep on walking, but instead you start getting upset. You want a car like that, but your salary isn't high enough. So you begin to think about how you can get a raise or a different job. You don't have to do all that. It could have just been, here comes the car and there it goes. And here comes the thought, there it goes. So replace the car with anything you don't have in your life. Suppose you don't have a meaningful relationship with a partner. Any happy couple, and you'll see in a movie or anywhere else, and you'll start feeling strange inside. And you'll start thinking, I don't have this family life. I don't have this partner. I don't have this success at work. I don't have this friend, this parent, whatever. And you'll start feeling small. I don't have this body that I'm seeing in the girl next door, whatever. So whenever you feel you lack something and you see it outside, it can be your trigger, or it can be anyone saying something. You can have your own trigger. But the moment that trigger comes and you start feeling strange inside you, Michael Singer saying that's the signal from life to stop. What do you do when you stop? You realize that this strangeness or low that I'm feeling has no ontological reality. It has no reality in being. It's just a program from my subconscious mind, what in the language of yoga we call a samskar, which has come up. Now, if I react the same way I have in the past, I'm strengthening the samskar. It will keep coming up more often and stronger. But if you just stay present to it, if you feel its energy and you soften behind it, if you let go, you fall into the soft garden outside. Outside, the landscape is covered with thorny crust, but we have a soft garden outside into which you can retreat. Is it making sense? Actually try to do it. Shut your eyes and just think of one thing that really triggers you, and feel that strange energy arising in you with that trigger. Now you'll feel that you have no choice but to feel this low or this discomfort, because life is like that, you're feeling like this. But that's not true. You're feeling like this because of patterns in your subconscious mind. It has nothing to do with the reality of life outside, although you're very convinced that life is doing it to you. Firstly, just understand that this discomfort you're feeling is a programming in your subconscious mind. That will give you one level of relief, because at least you'll understand that life out there is not bad. Because to change life out there seems overwhelming. But if you're convinced that it's something you need to shift inside you, it gives you hope. Now, once you're clear about that, feeling the discomfort, start relaxing the body. Start relaxing the shoulders, the belly, the forehead. Feel your breath. Normally when you feel the discomfort, you'll feel a tightening in your body. Just first relax the body. Breathe out. Soften behind the discomfort. Soften behind the emotional trigger. And just breathe. Recognize that however uncomfortable the feeling feels, it can't harm you. It's just an emotional state which will pass. It has no ontological reality, no reality in existence. And keep softening behind the discomfort. The discomfort could be something unhappy. Even if we are very excited about something pleasurable, in one way it's a discomfort. Because what we are looking for is balance. So whether it's attachment or aversion, catch the trigger when it comes and soften and relax behind it. Leave the thorns of the surface landscape and come to the soft garden within. Rumi's words: outside, the landscape covered with thorny crust, but we have a soft garden inside. Three more breaths. And then slowly open your eyes. So, any questions, any observations about this? Doable? Yeah?
You said you feel some unpleasant, there's a lot of things going inside. I was too tight and too much close. But
So, yes.
slowly I could release, but
Not fully, of course. You've spent so much energy building this samskar. You'll have to spend as much opposite energy erasing it. But it's good to remember two things when these one is that it's not real, the danger is not real. It's just a pattern from your subconscious mind. And secondly, instead of getting tied up with it, you step back, you soften and you relax. And each time you do this, you'll weaken the samskar, little more, little more, little more, till over a period of time it will dissolve.
Anahita,
Yeah?
you said that you stopped talking, but the words sometimes is so much to say. So how do you
See,
quieten
firstly, whenever you speak out of an imbalanced mind, you'll always say things which will make the situation worse. So as a rule, train yourself that when your mind is out of balance, you're not going to engage in a conversation. Put that up somewhere in a room, simple words. Whenever I'm out of balance, I will not speak. And keep reminding yourself of that.
I have a question.
Yeah?
I have a question. Are you not like just deferring the situation instead of facing it up front?
No, of course you must face it, but to face anything you need the right equipment to face it, right? If say you go into a war, you need your ammunition, and your ammunition is your consciousness. If you are not fortified with the right consciousness and you engage in any battle, you're going to lose. So first get your consciousness in the right place and then engage.
But it's also sometimes fight or flight is to protect you literally. You have to protect yourself.
You have to you have to protect yourself if you're in a jungle. But if it's somebody saying something terrible to you or something, the best protection is consciousness.
But you need to protect also if somebody is aggressive.
Withdraw and get your peace and then reply back.
Yeah, but that initial protection has to be there.
Protection, the protection can be surrender. Faith and surrender can be your greatest protection. Peace, faith, surrender, they are the greatest protection you can have if you have access to them.
Yes, but until you get there.
So until you get there, maybe withdraw from the situation. Don't engage with the person till you find the peace inside you. Step back. You have the ability to not go with any of these thoughts, Michael Singer says. You can just sit in the seat of consciousness and let go. A thought or emotion emerges, you notice it, and it passes by because you allow it to. This technique of freeing yourself is done with the understanding that thought and emotions are just objects of consciousness. They are not real. Thoughts and emotions, however, real in the sense if a thought comes that, oh my God, I'm going to be doomed. It's a thought, you're not actually going to be doomed, it's not real. So it's real to you, I respect that, but at least use logic to recognize that it's not real. It's just a thought or an emotional state. When you see your heart start getting anxious, you are obviously aware of this experience, but who is aware? It is the consciousness, the indwelling being, the soul, the self. It is the seer, the one who sees. The changes you experience in your inner energy flow are simply objects of this consciousness. If you want to be free, then every time you feel any change in the energy flow, relax behind it. I'm repeating the sentence again, learn it up if you need to. If you want to be free, then every time you feel any change in the energy flow, relax behind it. Don't fight with it. Don't try to change it. Don't judge it. Don't say, oh, I can't believe I'm still feeling this. You will say, after all the work I've done on myself, it's all useless. I promised myself I wouldn't think about it anymore. Don't do that. You will just end up going with the guilt thoughts instead of the car thoughts. We started with the example of the car. You have to let them all go. But it's not just about letting go of thoughts and emotions. It's actually, this is important, listen. It's actually about letting go of the pull of that energy, of the pull that the energy itself has on your consciousness. So let's take that example. I don't have a fulfilling partner, for example. I see another couple, another family very happy, and I start feeling strange inside. And there's a pull of that energy on my consciousness. So Michael Singer is saying, let go of that pull. You'll feel that pull as a tightening in your being. Recognize that tightening and just relax. Just breathe out, relax, and let go of that pull, that identification with that energy. You don't have to fight it, you don't have to wish it away, you have to just let it be and soften behind it. The key to it is to learn to soften behind that energy. Is it making sense? Energy is a combination of physical sensations, emotions, all that is the energy flow of that moment, including the physical. So, we've done several yoga classes a few months back on feeling the tightness and softening behind it. So, those of you who attended it, try and recollect that. It will make a lot of sense. If you can do it in an asana, it becomes much easier in life. So, it's actually about letting go of the pull of that energy itself has on your consciousness. The disturbed energy is trying to draw your attention into it. If you use your inner willpower to not go with it and just remain seated within, you will notice that the distinction between the consciousness and the object of consciousness is like night and day. They are totally different things. The object comes and goes, and the consciousness watches it come and go. Then the next object comes and goes while the consciousness watches it. Both objects came and went, but the consciousness did not go anywhere. It stays constant and simply watches all of it. The consciousness experiences the creation of thoughts and emotions, and it has the clarity to see where they came from. It sees all of this without thinking about it. It sees what's going on inside as easily as it sees what's going on outside. It simply watches. The self is watching the inside energies change in accordance to both inside and outside forces. All the energies that it watches will just come and go unless you lose your center of consciousness and go with them. The center of consciousness is the witness poise. A wise person remains centered enough to let go every time the energy shifts into a defensive mode. Anger is a defensive mode, fear is a defensive mode, anxiety is a defensive mode. So a wise person remains centered enough to let go every time the energy shifts into a defensive mode. The moment the energy moves and you feel your consciousness start to get drawn into it, you relax and release. Letting go means falling behind the energy instead of going into it. It just takes a moment of conscious effort to decide that you're not going there. You just let go. It's simply a matter of taking the risk that you're better off letting go than going with the energy. When you're free from the hold the energy has on you, you will be free to experience the joy and expansiveness that exists within you. So you decide life to free yourself. You become willing to pay any price for the freedom of your soul. You will realize that the only price you have to pay is letting go of yourself. Only you can take inner freedom away from yourself or give it to yourself. Only you can take inner freedom away from yourself or give it to yourself. Nobody else can. It doesn't matter what others do unless you decide that it matters to you. It doesn't matter what others do unless you decide that it matters to you. Begin with small things. We tend to let ourselves get bothered by little meaningless things that happen every day. For example, somebody beeps at you at a spotlight. As these little things happen, you will feel your energy change. For some people, it's a beeping spotlight. For some people, It could be a family member they are scared of. And the moment they hear the family member's footsteps, the family member hasn't said anything, but the moment you hear the footsteps, there starts a tightening in your body, right? Look at it logically as a third person. There's no danger. The person could just be walking out of the house. In that moment, the person is not going to harm you. But there's a programming in your subconscious mind that comes forward and you start tightening. And it's a pointless tightening. You don't need to be defensive. You're defensive just because of a conditioning in your mind. So at least start with those small things. When that tightening comes, remind yourself there's actually no danger. This is just a programming from my subconscious mind. And start breathing out. If your body is like this, actually let go and soften. And start with little things like that. Let go. Play with letting go and falling behind the sense of being bothered. Let's say someone at work took your pencil and you notice that every time you go to use another one, your inner energy shifts, even the slightest amount. Are you willing to release the old pencil in order to liberate yourself? This is how you make freedom a game. Instead of getting into being bothered, you get into being free. When you reach for a pencil and you see yourself getting a little uptight, let go. Pencil is an example, but any little thing that triggers you, if you're unconscious, you won't only realize you're getting triggered, you're sucked in. But that's why we have no choice but to become conscious. If you remain unconscious, you'll go on suffering. So you have to be conscious to pick up the triggers, recognize that I'm being triggered. But I'm being triggered not really by the outside is harmless, but my own thought patterns. And that's when you relax and let go. Your mind might start saying, it was a pencil today, and if I let go, they'll step all over me. It'll be my desk tomorrow, or my house, or even my husband. Take it to any situation. This pencil is one thing, but you'll feel that if I don't answer back, if I don't retaliate, I'll be doomed. I have to protect myself. I have to show the person what they are or whatever else. Now that's how the mind talks. It's very melodramatic. But you decide that for the cost of a pencil, you'll go for the ride. You tell your mind, when it's the car, we'll have a talk. Right now, it only costs a pencil to be free, right? So, suppose a person is invading your space in a very small way. The person has put something of hers on your table, say, okay, and it annoys you. It's a commonplace scenario. And you start thinking, if you don't really give her a peace of mind, today she's put one thing, tomorrow your whole table she'll claim as her own. But remind yourself that right now it's not the whole table. Right now it's this one pen she's put on my table. Am I going to give away my freedom for this one pen? No. Right now I'm going to soften and relax and let go. It's a choice. Do I want to fight with her so she picks up the pencil, or do I want my peace of mind? What would we choose? What would we choose? Any answers? Peace of mind, right? We are saying that here. But is that really going to be our answer when the rubber hits the road? It can be our answer. But you need to work on yourself and you need to develop that willpower.
It's all about controlling the self, right? The control.
It's not about controlling, it's about letting go of the wrong control you want. You want to control the situation, which is why you're getting tight and defensive. When you let go of the need to control it. You don't fight the mind. In fact, you don't even try to change it. You just make a game out of relaxing in the face of its melodrama. So typically some of us get triggered by that phone call from that person. Whenever that one person calls, my heart starts beating. Exactly what Michael Singer was saying. We close down, we withdraw inside, all our energy centers shut down. But that's the time to, what's the choice at that moment? To either go into the self-defensive mode or to just turn towards peace, faith and surrender and soften. That whatever news the phone call brings, life's handling it. It's not my baby to handle. I'll be present, but if I just go into it with faith, I'll see how faith is truly the worker of miracles. So that's your time to soften whenever those triggers come.
I have a question here. When you leave it to faith, people think that you are not working towards it. You are not taking the action because you are just.
Forget
letting
what
things
people think. What do you think? People will think all their lives. Don't care about that. And they shouldn't be thinking for you anyway. You should be thinking how you want to live your life. So what do you think?
So letting go can come across as.
Forget how it comes across. How does it come across to you is the question. Forget how it comes across to others. Yeah, are you convinced it's the right thing to do? Then stand up for it. And letting go doesn't mean not taking action. Reaction isn't action, it's unconsciousness. The real action comes from calm, and it's the right action.
But why triggers, like because of some past incident
Yes.
with that person
Yes.
or something like that?
Yeah, so it's your past, no? So that's what you have to let go of. What is your question? Did I answer it?
Yeah.
Okay. You just make a game out of relaxing in the face of its melodrama. You simply learn how to release the tendency for getting drawn into the energy. The root is where the consciousness is aware of the pull of these energies. This is the key. The root of this practice is where the consciousness is aware of the pull of the energies. Usually we are so unconscious that we are not aware of that exact instant when our energies start going strange and we get pulled. But if you can bring consciousness to that moment and soften and relax and let go, you're weakening that whole pattern of samskara.
I think if you become aware, then 80% of the work is done.
But not so much. You can be aware, but if you believe your mind in justifying the reaction, you're aware of the reaction, but you're still feeding the mind which is justifying it.
So, but once you're aware, once you see that shift, I mean, once you feel that change. In the
No. If you feel you feel the change in the energy, but if your mind is giving you a narrative that is justifying that change in energy and you're buying that narrative, then you won't do it. Your center of consciousness is always stronger than the energy that is pulling on it. You just have to be willing to exercise your will. It's not a fight or a struggle. It's not that you're trying to stop the energies from coming up inside. There's nothing wrong with feeling the energies of fear, jealousy, or attraction. This is beautiful. There is nothing wrong with feeling the energies of fear, jealousy, or attraction. It's not your fault that such energies exist. All the attractions, repulsions, thoughts, and feelings don't make any difference. They don't make you pure or impure. They are not you. You are the one who's watching, and that one is pure consciousness. Don't think you'd be free if you didn't have these kinds of feelings. It's not true. If you can be free even though you're having these kinds of feelings, then you are really free. because there will always be something. This is so beautiful. He's saying that don't feel that you're free only when you don't feel these negative triggers. The truth is, if you can be free even though you're having these kinds of feelings, then you're truly free. If you can learn to remain centered with smaller things, you will see that you can also remain centered with bigger things. Ultimately, even if terrible things happen, you should be able to live without emotional scars and impressions. If you don't hold these issues inside, you can go about your life without getting psychologically damaged. No matter what events take place in life, it is always better to let go rather than close. It's better to let go rather than close. There's a place deep inside of you where the consciousness touches the energy and the energy touches the consciousness. That's where your work is. From that place, you let go. Now we come to Mother's words. Beautiful. I put this up on our Savitri group. Behind the sorrow and loneliness, behind the emptiness and the feeling of incapacity, there is the golden light of the divine presence shining soft and warm. So beautiful. She's saying, behind the sorrow and loneliness, behind the emptiness and feeling of incapacity, there is the golden light of the divine presence shining soft and warm. And that's the place where you soften. When we say we are softening, we are actually softening into this soft garden inside. We said no outside, the landscape covered with thorny crust, but we have a soft garden inside. The soft garden inside is this golden light of the divine presence, and we can just soften into it. Michael Singer's words, the highest spiritual path is life itself. If you know how to live daily life, it all becomes a liberating experience. But first, you have to approach life properly. That's what Sri Aurobindo says, na? All life is yoga. The highest spiritual path is life itself. To begin with, you have to realize that you really only have one choice in this life. It's not about your career, whom you want to marry, or whether you want to seek God. People tend to burden themselves with so many choices, but in the end, you can throw it all away and just make one basic underlying decision. Do you want to be happy, or do you not want to be happy? It's really that simple. Once you make the choice, your path through life becomes totally clear. So he's saying the ultimate choice is, do you want to be happy or do you not want to be happy? That's the question. Events don't determine whether or not you're going to be happy. They are just events. You determine whether or not you are going to be happy. You can be happy just to be alive. You can be happy having all these things happen to you and then be happy if you die. If you can live this way, your heart will be so open and your spirit will be so free that you will soar up into heaven. Skip one paragraph. This choice to enjoy life will lead you through your spiritual journey. In truth, it is itself a spiritual teacher. Committing yourself to unconditional happiness will teach you every single thing there is to learn about yourself, about others, about life. You will learn all about your mind, your heart, your will. The key to staying happy is really very simple. begin by understanding your inner energies. If you look inside, you will see that when you're happy, your heart feels open and energy rushes up inside of you. When you aren't happy, your energy feels closed and no energy comes up inside. So to stay happy, just don't close your heart. No matter what happens, even if your wife leaves you or your husband dies, you don't close. You remain open by simply letting go and releasing the tendency to close. You just relax your heart when it starts to tighten. You don't have to be outwardly glowing all the time. You're just joyful inside. Instead of complaining, you're just having fun with different situations. Unconditional happiness is a very high path and a very high technique because it solves everything. You could learn yoga techniques such as meditation and postures, but what do you do with the rest of your life? The technique of unconditional happiness is ideal because what you're doing with the rest of your life is already defined. You're letting go of yourself so that you can remain happy. As far as spirituality goes, you're going to grow very rapidly. A person who actually does this every moment, every day, is going to notice the cleansing of their heart. This is because they are not getting involved in the stuff that comes up. They are also going to notice the purification of their mind because they are not getting involved with the mind's melodrama. Their Shakti is going to awaken even if they know nothing about Shakti. They will come to know a happiness that is beyond human understanding. This path solves daily life and it solves spiritual life. The greatest gift one can give to God is to be pleased with His creation. If you can remain spontaneously happy and centered, no matter what happens, you will find God. That's the amazing part. So, what he's saying is very simple. When you find things triggering you in life, what you need to do is to recognize that it's only a trigger, and instead of getting carried away, you start relaxing behind it. You choose, you put a will that I am going to be happy in spite of it. And you choose, don't think that you can be happy only if the situation changes. That's the biggest lie you tell yourself. The situation, your happiness is not about the situation. First, believe wholeheartedly that no matter what the situation is, if you shift inside you, you can be happy. And there's not one of us who hasn't felt this, right? The situation has been what it is, but you come to the center, you connect with Mother, you do yoga, whatever. You're not unhappy anymore. And you can train yourself to access this happiness every moment of your life. Not have to wait to come to the center, not have to wait to meditate. It can become your second nature with a little practice. So now this is Mother's words. To be spontaneous means not to think out, organize, decide, and make an effort to realize with the personal will. Mother says, I am going to give you 2 examples to make you understand what true spontaneity is. 1, you all know about it undoubtedly, is of the time Sri Aurobindo began writing the Arya in 1914. It was neither a mental knowledge nor even a mental creation which he transcribed. He silenced his mind, sat at the typewriter, and from above, from the higher planes, all that had to be written came down, all ready. and he only had to move his fingers on the typewriter and it was transcribed. It was in this state of my mental silence. It is in this state of mental silence which allows the knowledge and even the expression from above to pass through, that he wrote the whole Arya with its 64 printed pages a month. That is why, besides, he could do it, for if it had been a mental work of construction, it would have been quite impossible. That is true mental spontaneity. So, if we stay in this state of spontaneous happiness and calm, that's what Mother is saying, we don't become a doormat. The higher action flows through us. For example, that person has put a pen on our table which irritates us. If we don't react, if we stay in an absolute state of calm, then life takes the right action. Remember, there is one mind controlling every mind. We know that, right? Finally, it's one mind which is controlling every other mind. Now, if I am in the right consciousness, I'll invite the action of that one mind to work in that other mind, and maybe the person will be just guided to come and pick up the pen on her own. Maybe not. But either way, when I remain calm, life takes the action that needs to be taken. Maybe it will be through me, maybe I'll be given the right words that will change the situation, or it will work through somebody else. But the action will happen. Don't think that when you're not reacting, the action won't happen. This is true mental spontaneity. And if one carries this a little further, one should never think and plan beforehand what one ought to say or write. One should simply be able to silence one's mind, to turn it like a receptacle towards the higher consciousness and express as it receives it in mental silence what comes from above. That would be true spontaneity. Naturally, this is not very easy. It asks for preparation. And if one comes down to the sphere of action, it is still more difficult. For normally, if one wants to act with some kind of logic, one usually has to think out beforehand what one wants to do and plan it before doing it. Otherwise, one may be tossed about by all sorts of desires and impulses, which would be very far from the inspiration spoken about in Wu Wei. Wu Wei is the path of going with the flow. So it would simply be movements of the lower nature driving you to act. So Mother's saying that be spontaneous, don't plan and think too much beforehand. But to be so spontaneous, you should have the consciousness of stillness, which can allow the higher wisdom to go through. If you don't have that and you don't think, then you're just a puppet in the hands of your lower nature and your emotions. So, till you reach that consciousness, personal effort of planning is important. But once you're in that state of silence and spontaneity, then you don't need to plan anything. You spontaneously do what the situation requires. One must be spontaneous in order to be divine. This is what I've explained to you. Then the question, Mother says, then the question arises, how to be spontaneous? Mother replies, one must be perfectly simple in order to be spontaneous. So Mother's saying that so long as you're living out of your mind and its logic and its planning, you're not living a divine life. You have to be spontaneous in order to be divine. How can you be spontaneous? Mother says, be simple. And how to be perfectly simple? Mother says, one must be absolutely sincere in order to be perfectly simple. So she says, To be divine, you need to be spontaneous. To be spontaneous, you need to be simple. To be simple, you need to be sincere. Now the question is, what does it mean to be sincere? To be absolutely sincere is to not have any division, any contradiction in one's being. To be absolutely sincere means to do nothing out of the ego, which is a tall order. Because right now, if we are honest, 99.9% of what we do is driven by the ego. So it's a tall order. If you are made of pieces which are not only different but often quite contradictory, these pieces necessarily create a division in your being. For example, you have one part in yourself which aspires for the divine life, to know the divine, to unite with him, to live integrally. And then you have another part which has attachments, desires, what it calls needs, and which not only seeks these things but is quite upset when it does not have them. There are other contradictions, but this one is the most flagrant. There are others, for instance, like wanting to surrender completely to the divine, to give oneself up totally to his will and his guidance. But at the same time, when the experience comes, a common experience on the path, when one sincerely tries to give oneself up to the divine, the feeling that one is nothing, one can do nothing, that one doesn't even exist outside the divine. That is to say, if he were not there, one would not exist and could not do anything. One would not be anything at all. This experience naturally comes as a help on the path of total self-giving. But there is a part of the being which, when the experience comes, rises up in a terrible revolt and says, "But excuse me, I insist on existing. I insist on being something. I insist on doing things myself. I want credit. I want. I want to have a personality." And naturally, the second one undoes all that the first had done. These are not exceptional cases. This happens very frequently. I could give you innumerable examples of such contradictions in the being. When one part tries to take a step forward, the other one comes and demolishes everything. So you have to begin all the time, and every time it is demolished. That is why you must do this work of sincerity, which, when you perceive in your being a part that pulls the other way, makes you take it up carefully, educate it as one educates a child, and put it in harmony with the central part. That is the work of sincerity, and it is indispensable. And naturally, when there is a unity, an agreement, a harmony among all the wills of your being can become simple, candid, and uniform in its action and tendencies. It is only when the whole being is grouped around a single central movement that you can be spontaneous. For if within you there is something which is turned towards the divine and awaits the inspiration and impulse, and at the same time there is another part of your being which seeks its own ends and works to realize its own desires, you no longer know where you stand, and you can no longer be sure of what may happen. For one part can not only undo but totally contradict what others want to do. And surely, to be in harmony with what is said in Wu Wei, after having seen very clearly what is necessary and what ought to be done, it is recommended not to put either violence or too much zest into the realization of this program. For an excess zest is detrimental to peace and tranquility, and calm necessary for the divine consciousness to express itself through the individual. And it comes to this: balance is indispensable. The path that carefully avoids opposite extremes is indispensable. And too much haste is dangerous. Impatience prevents you from advancing, and at the same time, inertia puts a drag on your feet. Sri Aurobindo's words: Hasyam, laughter, is the active side of Sukham. It consists in an active internal state of gladness, cheerfulness, which no adverse experience, mental or physical, can trouble. Its perfection is God's stamp and seal on the Siddhi of Samatha. It is it is in our internal being the image of the smile of Sri Krishna playing Balavat as the eternal Balaka and Kumar in the garden of the world. So when we are anchored in Samatha, there's a natural laughter in our being, a laughter at all the appearances of life, because you see that everything is God playing a mask, playing with me, and you no longer take the masks of life very seriously. So now we end with Savitri. Around him shone a great felicitous day, a lustre of some rapturous infinite. It held in the splendor of its golden laugh regions of heart's happiness set free, intoxicated with the wine of God, immersed in light, perpetually divine. So this is an inner state where one has found that soft garden inside. Remember, outside the garden covered with thorny crust, but outside the landscape covered with thorny crust, we have a soft garden within. This is the soft garden within. Regions of the heart's happiness set free, intoxicated with the wine of God, immersed in light, perpetually divine. A favorite and intimate of the gods, obeying the divine command to joy, it was the sovereign of its own delight, the master of the kingdoms of its own force. So Sri Aurobindo says somewhere, look at life with the soul's vision and become the master of circumstances instead of its slave. When you keep tightening and reacting to every trigger, then you're a puppet in the hands of life. You're not the master of life. But when you look at life with the soul's vision, when you allow the triggers to come and you don't get pulled into the energies, you just soften and relax behind the energy, then a vision of the soul comes forward. You see life with the soul's vision. And you know, when that happens, it's amazing the perspectives that will come to you from your own inner vision. Life appears to be bad because you're seeing only that 1 second of life. If you had the larger vision, you would see that nothing in life is bad, that this person's rude behavior, that person's unfair behavior, in the wider context, it's exactly what it needs to be. If you're watching a drama, you won't call the villain wrong. The villain is playing the part for the narrative of the drama to unfold, right? The narrative of the drama can't unfold if there's no villain. So you won't hate the actor who's playing the villain, right? The same thing happens when you take the soul's vision inside. You see that every villain in your life is just, in a metaphorical sense, an actor playing the part for the narrative of your life to unfold. And you will see this if you quieten your mind. If you relax every time a trigger comes, from within you, you'll see different perspectives, perspectives of light, perspectives of wideness. And when you see those perspectives, the blame game will end, resentment will end, hurt and anger will end. And you'll become the sovereign of its own delight and master of the kingdoms of its own force, assured of the bliss for which all forms were made, unmoved by fear and grief and the shocks of fate, and unalarmed by the breath of fleeting time. So when you have this poise inside, when you have this soft garden inside, you are unmoved by fear and grief and the shocks of fate, and unalarmed by the breath of fleeting time, and unbesieged by adverse circumstances. The circumstances will come, but I'm not affected by them. I'm the master of circumstances. I'm no longer their slave. It breathed in a sweet, secure, unguarded ease, free from our body's frailty, inviting death, far from our danger zone of stumbling will. So our will, in our mind, it's a stumbling will, and a stumbling will is always a danger zone. It'll take you here, it'll take you there. So that's the danger zone of our stumbling will. But when we've gone beyond that mental logic to that space inside, we are far from our danger zone of stumbling will. It needed not to curb its passionate beats, thrilled by the clasp of the warm, satisfied sense, and the swift wonder rush and flame and cry of the life impulse's red, magnificent race. It lived in a jewel rhythm of the laughter of God. So beautiful. So then we live in a jewel rhythm, a shining, beautiful rhythm of the laughter of God. Everything we see the cosmic laugh, and we don't get scared. We see everything is permeated by the cosmic laugh, the laugh of God, and we don't let it upset us anymore. And lay on the breast of universal love, immune the unfettered spirit of delight, pastured his gleaming sun herds and moon flocks along the lyric speed of griefless streams, in fragrance of the unearthly asphodel. So I'll just read this whole passage without explanation. Just shut your eyes and feel it. Around him shone a great felicitous day, a lustre of some rapturous infinite. It held in the splendor of its golden laugh regions of the heart's happiness set free. Intoxicated with the wine of God, immersed in light perpetually divine, a favorite and intimate of the gods, obeying the divine command to joy, it was the sovereign of its own delight and master of the kingdoms of its own force, assured of the bliss for which all forms were made, unmoved by fear and grief and the shocks of fate, and unalarmed by the breath of fleeting time, and unbesieged by adverse circumstance. It breathed in a sweet, secure, unguarded ease, free from our body's frailty, inviting death, far from our danger zone of stumbling will. It needed not to curb its passionate beats, thrilled by the clasp of the warm, satisfied sense, and the swift wonder rush and flame and cry of the life impulse's red, magnificent race. It lived in a jewel rhythm of the laughter of God and lay on the breast of universal love, immune, the unfettered spirit of delight pastured his gleaming sun herds and moon flocks along the lyric speed of griefless streams in the fragrance of unearthly asphodel. So we sit quietly and we put a will to bring this class into our life. How? By making life itself a spiritual path, by making life an active, seamless meditation, by living life in a meditative state. How do we do that? What is a meditative state? A meditative state is a state of unmovable peace, calm, balance, samatha. How do we move towards that state? By recognizing that when we get imbalanced, when we are triggered by life, so that the energy inside us starts feeling agitated and uncomfortable, we first recognize that that change of energy is our chance to grow. We recognize that the change of energy is not necessarily caused by circumstances outside. It's just a pattern from our subconscious mind called a samskar playing itself out. It's harmless. It will play itself out and in its own season it will pass away. But how I stay in my consciousness while it's there will determine whether this samskar is strengthened and it will keep coming back and imprisoning me in the future, or it weakens. So when that energy comes up, that uncomfortable energy comes up, if I want to grow, I will be strong in the face of it. I will be present to it. I will not get pulled into it. I'll step back and soften and relax behind the energy. If I notice tightness in my belly or shoulders or anywhere, I exhale and soften the belly or shoulders. I keep breathing and relaxing behind the pull of the energy. Each time it comes up and I do this, it will come up less and less strong. Till the moment an uncomfortable energy comes up, I spontaneously start softening, relaxing, and come to peace. Then I discover the truth of Rumi's words. Outside the landscape is covered with thorny crust, but we have a soft garden inside. And every time I soften behind the thorns that trigger me, I take a step into the soft garden inside. And then I make up my mind that no matter what happens, I have decided to stay happy. That is an unconditional choice I make for the rest of my life. Hands together in a namaste. Take a long, slow inhalation. Breathe out with Om.